and welcome to the Deerfield Public Library Twitch channel. I'm Anne.
I'm Megan.
And this is our continuation of Lunchtime Listens, The Hobbit. So last week, we discovered the way in to the Lonely Mountain through the secret door that they seem to have forgotten only opened on a specific day when a specific moon is in the sky. So very conveniently, that was the day they looked. And so Bilbo met Smaug the dragon. And they had a little interlude.
A good tete-a-tete words.
Yeah, Bilbo's love of riddles coming in handy again, though he then went a little bit overboard and accidentally made Smaug think he was with the people from Lake Town. What could possibly go wrong with that? But then Smaug did get pretty angry because he stole a cup. And he went out and he ate all the ponies, R.I.P. to the second set of ponies.
Poor ponies.
And all the dwarves are now kind of stuck in the mountain because Bilbo was like, we gotta go down or we gotta get basically burnt to a crisp up here. And now Bilbo has just found the Arkenstone.
Yes, he's alone.
He's alone. He found the Arkenstone. Again, what could possibly go wrong with that? Yeah. Only the thing that Thorin is most interested in.
Yep. He's like, this is the thing I put a paste.
Put this in my pocket.
This will be my piece of the prize.
Yeah. Oh man. But either way, that's where we left off with them kind of looking around.
Yes.
The Smaug's lair because Smaug is out.
So Bilbo is alone and his light just went out. So this is him yelling. The light's gone out. Someone come and find me and help me. For the moment his courage had failed altogether. Faintly the dwarves heard his small cries, though the only word they could catch was, help! Help! Now what on earth or under it has happened, said Thorin. Certainly not the dragon, or he would not go on squeaking.
Yeah, that's accurate.
They waited a moment or two, and still there were no dragon noises. No sound at all, in fact, but Bilbo's distant voice. Come, one of you, get another light or two, Thorin ordered. It seems we have got to go and help our burglar. It is about our turn to help, said Balin, and I am quite willing to go. Anyway, I expect it is safe for the moment. Gloin lit several more torches, and then they all crept out, one by one, and went along the wall as hurriedly as they could. It was not long before they met Bilbo himself coming back towards them. His wits had quickly returned as soon as he saw the twinkle of their lights. Only a bat and a dropped torch, nothing worse, he said in answer to their questions. Though they were much relieved, they were inclined to be grumpy at being frightened for nothing. But what they would have said if he had told them at that moment about the Arkenstone, I don't know. The mere fleeting glimpses of treasure which they had caught as they went along had rekindled all the fire of their dwarvish hearts. And when the heart of a dwarf, even the most respectable, is awakened by gold and by jewels, he grows suddenly bold, and he may become fierce. Yes. The dwarves indeed no longer needed any urging. All were now eager to explore the hall while they had the chance, and willing to believe that, for the present, Smaug was away from home. Each now gripped a lighted torch, and as they gazed, first on one side and then on another, they forgot fear and even caution. They spoke aloud and cried out to one another as they lifted old treasures from the mound or from the wall and held them in the light, caressing and fingering them. Fili and Kili were almost in merry mood, and finding still hanging their many golden harps strung with silver, they took them and struck them. And being magical, and also untouched by the dragon, who had a small interest in music, they were still into.
Wow.
That's impressive.
That is a magic harp.
Yes. The dark hall was filled with a melody that had long been silent. But most of the dwarves were more practical. They gathered gems and stuffed their pockets, and let what they could not carry fall back through their fingers with a sigh. Thorin was not least among these, but always he searched from side to side for something which he could not find.
He's looking for the Arkenstone.
It was the Arkenstone.
Yeah, sorry.
But he spoke of it yet to no one. Now the dwarves took down mail and weapons from the walls and armed themselves.
Yeah.
Royal indeed did Thorin look, clad in a coat of gold-plated rings, and a silver-hafted axe and a belt crusted with scarlet stones. Mr. Baggins, he cried, here is the first payment of your reward. Cast off your old coat and put on this. With that he put on Bilbo a small coat of mail, wrought for some young elf prince long ago. It was of silver steel, which the elves called mithril. Mithril?
Well, mithril, but mithril's fine.
And with it went a belt of pearls and crystals. a light helm of figured leather, strengthened beneath with hoops of steel and studded about the brim with white gems, was set upon the hobbit's head. I feel magnificent, he thought, but I expect I look rather absurd. How they would laugh on the hill at home. Still, I wish there was a looking glass handy. All the same, Mr. Baggins kept his head more clear of the bewitchment of the hoard than the dwarves did. Long before the dwarves were tired of examining the treasures, he became wary of it and sat down on the floor, and he began to wonder nervously what the end of it all would be. I would give a good many of these precious goblets, he thought, for a drink of something cheering out of one of Garon's wooden bowls. Thorin, he cried.
I think it's Bjorn. B-E-O-R-N?
Yes.
Bjorn.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I was like, who's balls?
Thorin, he cried aloud. What next? We are armed, but what good has any armor ever been before against Smaug the Dreadful? This treasure is not yet won back. We are not looking for gold yet, but for a way of escape, and we have tempted luck too long. You speak the truth, answered Thorin, recovering his wits. Let us go. I will guide you. Not in 1,000 years shall I forget the ways of this palace. Then he hailed the others, and they gathered together, and holding their torches above their heads, they passed through the gaping doors, not without many a backward glance of longing. Their glittering mail they had covered again with their old cloaks, and their bright helms with their tattered hoods, and one by one they walked behind Thorin, a line of little lights in the darkness that halted often, listening in fear once more for any rumor of the dragon's coming. Though all the old adornments were long moldered or destroyed, and though all was befouled and blasted with the comings and goings of the monster, Thorin knew every passage and every turn. They climbed long stairs, and turned and went down wide echoing ways, and turned again and climbed yet more stairs, and yet more stairs again. These were smooth, cut out of the living rock, broad and fair, and up the dwarves went, and they met no sign of any living thing, only furtive shadows that fled from the approach of their torches fluttering in the drums. The steps were not made, all the same, for hobbit legs, and Bilbo was just feeling that he could go on no longer when suddenly the roof sprang high and far beyond the reach of their torchlight. A white glimmer could be seen coming through some opening far above, and the air smelt sweeter. Before them, light came dimly through great doors that hung twisted on their hinges and half burned. This is the great chamber of Thor, said Thorin, the hall of feasting and of council. Not far off now is the front gate. They passed through the ruined chamber. Tables were rotting there, chairs and benches were lying there overturned, charred and decaying. Skulls and bones were upon the floor among flagons and bowls and broken drinking horns and dust.
Yeah, a lot of people died when Smaug showed up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and no one, it's not like Smaug was like, oh, spring cleaning.
Yeah, he was like, this is where you bury the bodies.
Yeah.
He just doesn't go
He
there.
just leaves. He just leaves. Like, he probably just uses this as a pass-through.
Right.
Because he just hangs out with all the stuff down
Right,
in the
that's
basement.
his main room.
Yep.
As they came through yet more doors at the further end, a sound of water fell upon their ears, and the grey light grew suddenly more full. There's the birth of the running river, said Thorin. From here it hastens to the gate. Let us follow it. Out of a dark opening in a wall of rock issued a boiling water, and it flowed swirling in a narrow channel, carved and made straight and deep by the cunning of ancient hands. Beside it ran a stone-paved road, wide enough for many men abreast. Swiftly along this they ran, and round a wide sweeping turn, and behold, before them stood the broad light of day. In front there rose a dull arch, still showing the fragments of old carven work within, worn and splintered and blackened through it was. A mystic sun sent its pale light between the arms of the mountain, and beams of gold fell on the pavement at the threshold. A whirl of bats, frightened from the slumber by their smoking torches, flurried over them. As they sprang forward, their feet slithered on stones, rubbed smooth and slime by the passing of the dragon. Now before them the water fell noisily outward and foamed down towards the valley. They flung their pale torches to the ground and stood gazing out with dazzled eyes. They were come to the front gate and were looking out upon Dale. Well, said Bilbo, I never expected to be looking out at this door. I never expected to be so pleased to see the sun again, and to feel the wind on my face. But, oh, this wind is cold. It was.
It was.
A bitter easterly breeze blew with a threat of oncoming winter. It swirled over and round the arms of the mountain into the valley, inside among the rocks. After their long time in the stewing depths of the dragon-haunted caverns, they shivered in the sun. Suddenly, Bilbo realized that he was not only tired, but also very hungry indeed. "It seems to be late morning," he said, "and so I suppose it is more or less breakfast time, if there is any breakfast to have. But I don't feel that Smaug's front doorstep is the safest place for a meal."
Probably not.
No. Let's go somewhere where we can sit quiet for a bit. See, hobbits just get,
Yeah, hobbits just want to like sit and eat and drink and smoke pipe weed and call it a day. And
some days you just want to do that.
Yeah.
"Quite right," said Balin, "and I think I know which way we should go. We ought to make the old lookout post at the southwest corner of the mountain." "How far is that?" asked the Hobbit. 5 hours march, I should think." That's not breakfast anymore, but okay. "It'll be a rough going. The road, forget about 11 seeds,
Yeah.
The road from the gate along the left edge of the stream seems all broken up. But look down there. The river loops suddenly east across Dale in front of the ruined town. At that point, there was once a bridge, leading to steep stairs that climbed up the right bank, and so to a road running towards Ravenhill. There is, or was, a path that left the road and climbed up to the post. A hard climb too, even if the old steps are still there. "Dear me," grumbled the Hobbit. "More walking and more climbing without breakfast?
Oh, God.
I wonder how many breakfasts and other meals we have missed inside that nasty, clockless, timeless hole." He's like, how many meals did I miss?
Especially when you consider hobbits have 7 a day.
Yeah,
It's quite a lot.
many.
So many.
Oh, man. As a matter of fact, 2 nights and the day between had gone by,
So
and
14
not
nights.
altogether without food, since the dragon smashed the magic door. But Bilbo had quite lost count, and it might have been 1 night or a week of nights for all that he could tell. Come, said Thorin, laughing. His spirits had begun to rise again, and he rattled the precious stones in his pockets. "Don't call my palace a nasty hole. You wait till it has been cleaned and redecorated."
You wait until I get the redecorators in here. We're doing an HGTV show and everything.
You want to get the name of my interior designer?
Yes.
"That won't be till Smaug's dead," said Bilbo glumly. "In the meanwhile, where is he? I would give a good breakfast to know. I hope he is not up on the mountain looking down at us." That idea disturbed the dwarves mightily, and they quickly decided that Bilbo and Balin were right. "We must move away from here," said Dori. "I feel his eyes from the back of my head." "It's a cold, lonesome place," said Bombor. "There may be drink, but I see no sign of food. A dragon would always be hungry in such parts." Come on, cried the others. "Let us follow Balin's path." Under the rocky wall to the right, there was no path, so on they trudged among the stones on the left side of the river, and the emptiness and desolation soon sobered even Thorin again. The bridge that Balin had spoken of they found long fallen, and most of its stones were now only boulders in the shallow, noisy stream. But they forded the water through much difficulty, and found the ancient steps, and climbed the high bank. After going a short way, they struck the old road, and before long came to a deep dell sheltered among the rocks. There they rested for a while, and had such a breakfast as they could, chiefly cram and water.
Yeah.
If you want to know what cram is, I can only say that I don't know the recipe, but it is biscuitish.
It's basically hardtack.
It's good indefinitely. It's supposed to be sustaining, and is certainly not entertaining, being in fact very uninteresting except as a chewing exercise. It was made by the lakemen for long journeys.
It's basically hardtack. And it's not as good as Lumbus, which is basically Elvish hardtack, but way better.
After that, they went on again, and now the road struck westwards and left the river, and the great shoulder of the south-pointing mountain spur drew even nearer. At length they reached the hill path. It scrambled steeply up, and they plodded slowly one behind the other, till at last, in the late afternoon, they came to the top of the bridge and saw the wintry sun going downwards to the west. Here they found a flat place without a wall on 3 sides, but backed to the north by a rocky face in which there was an opening like a door. From that door, there was a wide view of east and south and west. Here, said Balin, in the old days we used to always to keep watchmen, and that door behind leads to a rock-hewn chamber that was made here as a guard room. There were several places like it around the mountain, but there seemed small need for watching in the days of our prosperity, and the guards were made over-comfortable, perhaps. Otherwise, we might have had longer warning for the coming of the dragon, and things might have been different. Still, here we can now lie hid and sheltered for a while, and can see much without being seen. Not much use if we have been seen coming here, said Dori, who was always looking up towards the mountain's peak, as if he expected to see Smaug perched there like a bird on a steeple. We must take our chance of that, said Thorin. We can go no further today. Here, here, cried Bilbo, and flung himself on the ground. In the rock chamber, there would have been room for 100, and there was a small chamber further in, more removed from the cold outside. It was quite deserted. Not even wild animals seemed to have used it in all the days of Smaug's dominance. There they laid their burdens, and some threw themselves down at once and slept, but the others sat near the outer door and discussed their plans. In all their talk, they came perpetually back to one thing. Where was Smaug? They looked west, and there was nothing, and east there was nothing, and in the south there was no sign of the dragon, but there was a gathering of very many birds. At that they gazed and wondered, but they were no nearer understanding it when the first cold stars came out. Chapter 14. Fire and Water.
Where'd Smaug go?
The town. And here we go.
Here we go.
Now, if you wish, like the dwarves, to hear news of Smaug, you must go back again to the evening when he smashed the door and flew off in a rage 2 days before. The men of Lake Town, Esgaroth, were mostly indoors. Esgaroth, thank you.
Yeah.
For the breeze was from the black east and chill, but a few were walking on the quays, and watching, as they were fond of doing, the stars shine out from the smooth patches of the lake as they opened in the sky. From their town, the lonely mountain was mostly screened by the low hills at the far end of the lake, though a gap in which the running river came down from the north. Only its high peak could they see in clear weather, and they looked seldom at it, for it was ominous and drear even in the light of morning. Now it was lost and gone, blotted in the dark. Suddenly, it flickered back to view. A brief glow touched it and faded. Look, said one, the lights again. Last night the watchman saw them start and fade from midnight until dawn. Something is happening up there. Perhaps the king of the mountain is forging gold, said another. It is long since he went north. It is time the songs began to prove themselves again. Which king? Said another with a grim voice. As like as not, it is the marauding fire of the dragon, the only king under the mountain we have ever known. You are always foreboding gloomy things, said the others. Anything from floods to poisoned fish. Think of something cheerful.
Okay, can you maybe not be a Debbie Downer about this?
Can't be the dragon. There's only a bunch of lights.
This guy, when the dragon shows up, is going to be like, ha-ha!
As he bursts into flames.
Yeah, as he is, yeah.
Then suddenly a great light appeared in the low place in the hills, and the northern end of the lake turned golden. The king beneath the mountain, they shouted, his wealth is like the sun, his silver like a fountain. His rivers run golden run. The river is running gold from the mountain, they cried, and everywhere windows were opening and feet were hurrying. There was once more tremendous excitement and enthusiasm. But the grim voiced fellow ran hotfoot to the master. The dragon is coming, or I am a fool, he cried. Cut the bridges! To arms! To arms! Then warning trumpets were suddenly sounded and echoed along the rocky shores. The cheering stopped, and the joy was turned to dread. So it was the dragon did not find them quite unprepared.
I think the grim fellow might be Bard.
Oh. Well.
So, the only one on top of things.
Truly. Someone needs to be right.
Someone needs to be.
Before long, so great was his speed, they could see him as a spark of fire rushing towards them and growing ever huger and more bright. And not the most foolish doubted that the prophecies had gone rather wrong. Still, they had a little time. Every vessel in the town was filled with water, every warrior was armed, every arrow and dart was ready, and the bridge to the land was thrown down and destroyed before the roar of Smaug's terrible approach grew loud, and the lake rippled red as fire beneath the awful beating of his wings. Amid shrieks and wailing and the shouts of men, he came over them, swept towards the bridges, and was foiled. The bridge was gone, and his enemies were on an island in deep water, too deep and dark and cool for his liking. If he plunged into it, a vaporous steam would arise, enough to cover all the land with a mist for days. But the lake was mightier than he, and it would quench him before he could pass through.
Okay, I guess smog is fire, so being on water is actually a good defense.
Okay. Yeah.
He's still in the air, so I still have questions.
We'll see if he figures it out.
Yeah.
Roaring, he swept back over the town. A hail of dark arrows leaped up and snapped and rattled on his scales and jewels, and their shafts fell back, kindled by his breath, burning and hissing into the lake. No fireworks you ever imagined equaled the sights that night. At the twanging of the bows and the shrilling of the trumpets, the dragon's wrath blazed to its height, till he was blind and mad with it. No one had dared to give battle to him for many an age, nor would they have dared now if it had not been for the grim-voiced man. Bard was his name.
I was right! It's almost like I've read this book a bunch.
Who ran to and fro, cheering on the archers and urging the master to order them to fight to the last arrow. Fire leapt from the dragon's jaws. He circled for a while, high in the air above them, lighting all the lake. The trees by the shores shone like copper and like blood, with leaping shadows of dense black at their feet. Then down he swooped straight through the arrow storm, reckless in his rage, taking no heed to turn his scaly sides towards his foes, seeking only to set their town ablaze. Fire leaped from thatched roofs and wooden beam ends as he hurtled down and passed and round again, though all had been drenched with water before he came. Once more, water was flung by a hundred hands wherever a spark appeared.
That's the other reason to be on here. You have an automatic fire system.
That's true. Back swirled the dragon. A sweeping of his tail and the roof of the great house crumbled and smashed down. Flames unquenchable sprang high into the night. Another swoop and another house, and then another sprung fire and fell, and still no arrow hindered Smog or hurt him more than a fly from the marshes.
Already men were jumping into the water on every side. Women and children were being huddled into laden boats in the market pool. Just saying, they could have gotten the women and children out before, but whatever. Bard was busy. There's only so much one guy can do, and he's the only one who was like, this is the dragon.
Yeah, they didn't have a emergency plan.
Yes, clearly. Master really should have worked on that. Weapons were flung down. There was mourning and weeping, where but a little time ago the old songs of mirth to come had been sung about the dwarves. Now men cursed their names. The master himself was turning to his great gilded boat, hoping to row away in the confusion and save himself. Soon all the town would be deserted and burned down to the surface of the lake. That was the dragon's hope. They could all get into boats for all he cared. There he could have fine sport hunting them, or they could stop till they starved. Let them try to get to land, and he would be ready. Soon he would set all the shoreland woods ablaze, and wither every field and pasture. Just now he was enjoying the sport of town baiting more than he had enjoyed anything for years. But there was still a company of archers that held their ground among the burning houses. Their captain was Bard, grim-voiced and grim-faced, whose friends had accused him of prophesying floods and poisoned fish, though they knew his worth and courage. He was a descendant in long line of Girion, Lord of Dale, whose wife and child had escaped down the running river from the ruin long ago. Now he shot with a great yew bow, till all his arrows but one were spent. The flames were near him. His companions were leaving him. He bent his bow for the last time. Suddenly, out of the dark, something fluttered to his shoulder. He started, but it was only an old thrush. Unafraid, it perched by his ear, and it brought him news. Marveling, he found he could understand its tongue, for he was of the race
It's
of
the
Dale.
thrush from earlier! Hey!
Wait, it said to him. The moon is rising. Look for the hollow of the left breast as he flies and turns above you. And while Bard paused in wonder, it told him of tidings up in the mountain and of all that it had heard. Then Bard drew his bowstring to his ear. The dragon was circling back, flying low, and as he came, the moon rose above the eastern shore and silvered his great wings. Arrow, said the bowman, black arrow, I have saved you to the last. You have never failed me, and always I have recovered you. I had you from my father, and he from of old. If ever you came from the forges of the true king under the mountain, go now and speed well. The dragon swooped once more, lower than ever, and as he turned and dived down, his belly glittered white with sparkling fires of gems in the moon, but not in one place. The great bow twanged. The black arrow sped straight from the string, straight for the hollow by the left breast where the foreleg was flung wide. In it smote and vanished, barb, shaft, and feather, so fierce was its flight. With a shriek that deafened men, felled trees and split stone, Smaug shot spouting into the air, turned over, and crashed down from on high in ruin. Full on the town he fell. His last throws splintered it to sparks and gleeds. The lake roared in. A vast steam leaped up, white in the sudden dark under the moon. There was a hiss, a gushing whirl, and then silence. And that was the end of Smaug and Esgaroth, but not of Bard. The waxing moon rose higher and higher, and the wind grew loud and cold. It twisted the white fog into bending pillars and hurrying clouds and drove it off to the west to scatter in tattered shreds over the marshes before Mirkwood. Then the many boats could be seen dotted dark on the surface of the lake, and down the wind came the voices of the people of Esgaroth, lamenting their lost town and goods and ruined houses. Good thing there's an entire ruin of a town called Dale up near the mountain. But they really had much to be thankful for, had they thought of it, though it could hardly be expected that they should just then. 3/4 of the people of the town had at least escaped alive. Their woods and fields and pastures and cattle and most of their boats remained undamaged, and the dragon was dead. What that meant they had not yet realized. They gathered in mournful crowds upon the western shores, shivering in the cold wind, and their first complaints and anger were against the master, who had left the town so soon while some were still willing to defend it. He may have a good head for business, especially his own business, some muttered, but he is no good when anything serious happens. And they praised the courage of Bard in his last mighty shot. If only he had not been killed, they all said, we would make him a king. Bard the dragon shooter of the line of Girion. Alas that he is lost. And in the very midst of their talk, a tall figure stepped from the shadows. He was drenched with water, his black hair hung wet over his face and shoulders, and a fierce light was in his eyes. Bard is not lost, he cried. He died from Esgaroth when the enemy was slain. I am Bard of the line of Girion. I am the slayer of the dragon. King Bard, they shouted. The master ground his chattering teeth. Girion was lord in Dale, not king of Esgaroth, he said. In the lake town, we have always elected masters from among the old and wise, and have not endured the rule of mere fighting men. Let King Bard go back to his own kingdom. Dale is now freed by his valor, and nothing hinders his return. And any that wish can go with him if they prefer the cold stones under the shadow of the mountains to the green shores of the lake. The wise will stay here and hope to rebuild our town and enjoy again in time its peace and riches. We will have King Bard, the people near at hand shouted in reply. We have had enough of the old men and the money counters. And people further off took up the cry, up the bowmen and down the money bags, till the clamor echoed along the shore. I am the last man to undervalue Bard the bowman, said the master warily, for Bard now stood close beside him. He has tonight earned an eminent place in the roll of the benefactors of our town, and he is worthy of many imperishable songs. But why, O people? And here the master rose to his feet and spoke very loud and clear. Why do I get all your blame? For what fault am I to be deposed? Who aroused the dragon from his slumber, I might ask? Who obtained of us rich gifts and ample help, and led us to believe that old songs could come true? Who played on our soft hearts and our pleasant fancies? What sort of gold have they sent down the river to reward us? Dragonfire and ruin. From whom should we claim the recompense of our damage and aid for our widows and orphans? As you see, the master had not got his position for nothing. The result of his words was that for a moment the people quite forgot the idea of a new king and turned their angry thoughts towards Thorin and his company. Wild and bitter words were shouted from many sides, and some of those who had before sung this old song's loudest were now heard as loudly crying that the dwarves had stirred the dragon up against them deliberately. Fools, said Bard, why waste words and wrath on those unhappy creatures? Doubtless they perished first in fire before Smaug came to us. Then, even as he was speaking, the thought came into his heart, the fabled treasure of the mountain, lying without guard or owner. And he fell suddenly silent. He thought of the master's words and of Dale rebuilt and filled with golden bells, if he could but find the men. At last he spoke again. This is no time for angry words, master, or for considering weighty plans of change. There's work to do. I serve you still, though after a while I may think again of your words, and go north with any that will follow me." Then he strode off to help in the ordering of the camps and in the care of the sick and the wounded. But the master scowled at his back as he went and remained sitting on the ground. He thought much but said little, unless it was to call loudly for men to bring him fire and food. Now everywhere Bard went, he found talk running like fire among the people concerning the vast treasure that was now unguarded. Men spoke of the recompense for all their harm that they would soon get from it, and wealth over and to spare with which to buy rich things from the south. That'd be Gondor. That's Gondor. And Rohan. And it cheered them greatly in their plight. That was as well, for the night was bitter and miserable. Shelters could be contrived for few. The master had one. And there was little food. Even the master went short. Many took ill of wet and cold and sorrow that night, and afterwards died, who had escaped uninjured from the ruin of the town. And in the days that followed there was much sickness and great hunger. Meanwhile Bard took the lead and ordered things as he wished, though always in the master's name. And he had a hard task to govern the people and direct the preparations for their protection and housing. Probably most of them would have perished in the winter that now hurried after autumn if help had not been to hand. But help came swiftly, for Bard at once had speedy messengers sent up the river to the forest to ask the aid of the king of the elves of the wood. And these messengers had found a host already on the move, although it was then only the third day after the fall of Smog. The Elven king had received news from his own messengers and from the birds that loved his folk, and already knew much of what had happened. Very great indeed was the commotion among all things with wings that dwelt on the borders of the desolation of the dragon. The air was filled with circling flocks, and their swift-flying messengers flew here and there across the sky. Above the borders of the forest there was a whistling, crying, and piping. Far over Mirkwood tidings spread. Smog is dead. Leaves rustled and startled ears were lifted. Even before the Elven king rode forth, the news had passed west, right to the pine woods of the misty mountains. Beorn had heard it in his wooden house, and the goblins were at council in their caves. "That will be the last we shall hear of Thorin Oakenshield, I fear," said the king. "He would have done better to have remained my prisoner, same div. It is an ill wind all the same," he added, "that blows no one any good." For he too had not forgotten the legend of the wealth of Thror. So it was that Bard's messengers found him now marching with many spearmen and bowmen, and crows were gathered thick above him, for they thought that war was awakening again, such as not been in these parts for a long age. But the king, when he received the prayers of Bard, had pity, for he was the lord of a good and kindly people. So turning his march, which had at first been direct towards the mountain, he hastened now down the river to the long lake. He had not boats or rafts enough for his host, and they were forced to go the slower way by foot, but great store of goods he sent ahead by water. Still, elves are light-footed, and though they were not in these days much used to the marches and the treacherous lands between the forest and the lake, their going was swift. Only 5 days after the death of the dragon, they came upon the shores and looked on the ruins of the town. Their welcome was good, as may be expected, and the men and their master were ready to make any bargain for the future in return for the Elven king's aid. Their plans were soon made. With the women and the children, the old and the unfit, the master remained behind. And with him were some men of crafts and many skilled elves, and they busied themselves felling trees and collecting the timber sent down from the forest. Then they set about raising many huts by the shore against the oncoming winter. And also under the master's direction, they began the planning of a new town, designed more fair and large even than before, but not in the same place. They moved northward, higher up the shore. For ever after they had a dread of the water where the dragon lay. He would never again return to his golden bed, but was stretched as cold as stone, twisted upon the floor of the shallows. There for ages his huge bones could be seen in calm weather, amid the ruined piles of the old town. But few dared to cross the cursed spot, and none dared to dive into the shivering water or recover the precious stones that fell from his rotting carcass. Wow.
That's an image.
That's an image, yeah. But all the men of arms, who were still able, and most of the Elven king's array, got ready to march north to the mountain. It was thus that in 11 days from the ruin of the town, the head of their host passed the rock gates at the end of the lake and came into the desolate lands. The gathering of the clans. Now we will return to Bilbo and the dwarves. All night one of them had watched, but when morning came, they had not heard or seen any sign of danger. But ever more thickly the birds were gathering. Their companies came flying from the south, and the crows that still lived above the mountain were wheeling and crying unceasingly above. Something strange is happening, said Thorin. The time has gone for the autumn wanderings, and these are the birds that dwell always in the land. There are starlings and flocks of finches, and far off there are many carrion birds, as if battle were afoot. Suddenly Bilbo pointed. There's the old thrush again, he cried. He seems to have escaped when Smaug smashed the mountainside, but I don't suppose the snails have. Sure enough, the old thrush was there, and as Bilbo pointed, he flew towards them and perched on a stone nearby. Then he fluttered his wings and sang. Then he cocked his head to one side, as if to listen, and again he sang, and again he listened. I believe he's trying to tell us something, said Balin, but I cannot follow the speech of such birds. It is very quick and difficult. Can you make it out, Baggins? Not very well, said Bilbo. As a matter of fact, he could make nothing of it at all. But the old fellow seems very excited. I only wish he was a raven, said Balin. I thought you did not like them. You seemed very shy of them when we came this way before. Those were crows, and nasty, suspicious-looking creatures at that, and rude as well. You must have heard the ugly names they were calling after us. But the ravens are different. There used to be great friendship between them and the people of Thror, and they often brought us secret news, and were rewarded with such bright things as they coveted to hide in their dwellings. They live many a year, and their memories are long, and they hand on their wisdom to their children. I knew many among the ravens of the rocks when I was a dwarf lad. This very height was once named Raven Hill, because there was a wise and famous pair, old Kark and his wife, that lived here above the guard chamber. But I don't suppose that any of that ancient breed linger here now. No sooner had he finished speaking than the old thrush gave a loud call and immediately flew away. We may not understand him, but that old bird understands us, I am sure, said Balin. Keep watch now and see what happens. Before long there was a fluttering of wings, and back came the thrush, and with him came a most decrepit old bird. He was getting blind, he could hardly fly, and the top of his head was bald. He was an aged raven of great size. He alighted stiffly on the ground before them, slowly flapped his wings, and bobbed towards Thorin. "O Thorin, son of Thrain, and Balin, son of Fundine," he croaked, and Bilbo could understand what he said, for he used ordinary language and not bird speak. "I am Rogue, son of Kark. Kark is dead, but he was well known to you once. It is 100 years and 53 since I came out of the egg, but I do not forget what my father told me. Now I am the chief of the great ravens of the mountain. We are few, but we remember still the king that was of old. Most of my people are abroad, for there are great tidings in the south. Some are tidings of joy to you, and some you will not think so good. Behold, the birds are gathering back again to the mountain, and to Dale from south and east and west, for word has gone out that Smaug is dead." "Dead? Dead?" shouted the dwarves. "Dead? Then we have been in needless fear, and the treasure is ours." They all sprang up and began to caper about for joy. "Yes, dead," said Roic. "The thrush, may his feathers never fall, saw him die, and we may trust his words. He saw him fall in battle with the men of Esgaroth the third night back from now at the rising of the moon." It was some time before Thorin could bring the dwarves to be silent and listen to the raven's news. At length, when he had told all the tale of the battle, he went on. "So much for joy, Thorin Oakenshield. You may go back to your halls in safety. All the treasure is yours, for the moment. But many are gathering hither besides the birds. The news of the death of the Guardian has already gone far and wide, and the legend of the wealth of Thror has not lost in the telling during many years. Many are eager for a share of the spoil. Already a host of the elves is on the way, and carrion birds are with them, hoping for battle and slaughter. By the lake, men murmur that their sorrows are due to the dwarves, for they are homeless, and many have died, and Smaug destroyed their town. They too think to find amends from your treasure, whether you are alive or dead. Your own wisdom must decide your course, but 13 is a small remnant of the great folk of Durin that once dwelt here, and now are scattered far. If you will listen to my counsel, you will not trust the master of the lake men, but rather him that shot the dragon with his bow. Bard is he, of the race of Dale, the line of Girion. He is a grim man, but true. We would see peace once more among dwarves and men and elves after the long desolation, but it may cost you dear in gold. I have spoken." Then Thorin burst forth in anger. "Our thanks, Roic Kark's son. You and your people shall not be forgotten. But none of our gold shall thieves take or the violent carry off while we are alive. If you would earn our thanks still more, bring us news of any that draw near. Also, I would beg of you, if any of you are still young and strong of wing, that you would send messengers to our kin in the mountains of the north, both west from here and east, and tell them of our plight. But go especially to my cousin Dane in the Iron Hills, for he has many people well armed and dwells nearest to this place. Bid him hasten. I will not say if this counsel be good or bad, croaked Roic, but I will do what can be done. Then off he slowly flew.
Oh.
Back now to, just slow. He's 153. Back now to the mountain, cried Thorin. We have little time to lose. And little food to use, cried Bilbo, always practical on such points.
Yes.
In any case, he felt that the adventure was, properly speaking, over with the death of the dragon, in which he was much mistaken, and he would have given most of his share of the profits for the peaceful winding up of these affairs. Back to the mountain, cried the dwarves, as if they had not heard him, so back he had to go with them. As you have heard some of the events already, you will see that the dwarves still had some days before them. They explored the caverns once more and found, as they expected, that only the front gate remained open. All the other gates, except of course the small secret door, had long ago been broken and blocked by smog, and no sign of them remained. So now they began to labor hard in fortifying the main entrance, and in making a new path that led from it. Tools were to be found in plenty that the miners and quarriers and builders of old had used, and at such work the dwarves were still very skilled. As they worked, the ravens brought them constant tidings. In this way they learned that the Elven King had turned aside to the lake, and they still had a breathing space. Better still, they heard that 3 of their ponies had escaped and were wandering wild far down the banks of the running river, not far from where the rest of their stores had been left. So while the others went on with their work, Fili and Kili were sent, guided by a raven, to find the ponies and bring back all they could. They were 4 days gone, and by that time they knew that the joined armies of the Lakemen and the Elves were hurrying towards the mountain. But now their hopes were higher, for they had food for some weeks with care, chiefly cram of course, and they were very tired of it, but cram is much better than nothing. And already the gate was blocked with a wall of squared stones laid dry, but very thick and high, across the opening. There were holes in the wall through which they could see or shoot, but no entrance. They climbed in or out with ladders and hauled stuff up with ropes. For the issuing of the stream, they had contrived a small low arch under the new wall, but near the entrance they had so altered the narrow bed that a wide pool stretched out from the mountain wall to the head of the fall over which the stream went towards Dale. Approach to the gate was now only possible without swimming along a narrow ledge of the cliff, to the right as one looked outward from the wall. The ponies they had brought only to the head of the steps above the old bridge, and unloading them there had bidden them return to their masters and sent them back riderless to the south. There came a night when suddenly there were many lights, as of fires and torches away south in Dale before them. They have come, cried Balin, and their camp is very great. They must have come into the valley under the cover of dusk along both banks of the river. That night the dwarves slept very little. The morning was still pale when they saw a company approaching. From behind their wall they watched them come up to the valley's head and climb slowly up. Before long they could see that both men of the lake armed as if for war and elvish bowmen were among them. At length the foremost of these climbed the tumbled rocks and appeared at the top of the falls, and very great was their surprise to see the pool before them, and the gate blocked with a wall of new hewn stone. As they stood pointing and speaking to one another, Thorin hailed them. "Who are you?" he cried in a very loud voice, "that comes as if in war to the gates of Thorin, son of Thrain, king under the mountain? And what do you desire?" But they answered nothing. Some turned swiftly back, and the others, after gazing for a while at the gate and its defenses, soon followed them. That day the camp was moved to the east of the river, right between the arms of the mountain. The rocks echoed then with voices and with song, as they had not done for many a day. There was the sound, too, of elven harps and of sweet music, and as it echoed up towards them, it seemed that the chill of the air was warmed, and they caught faintly the fragrance of woodland flowers blossoming in spring. Then Bilbo longed to escape from the dark fortress, and to go down and join in the mirth and feasting by the fires. Some of the younger dwarves were moved in their hearts, too, and they muttered that they wished things had fallen out otherwise, and they might welcome such folk as friends. But Thorin scowled. Then the dwarves themselves brought forth harps and instruments regained from the hoard, and made music to soften his mood. But their song was not an elvish song, and it was much like the song they had sung long before in Bilbo's little hobbit hole. Under the mountain dark and tall, the king has come unto his hall. His foe is dead, the worm of dread, and ever so his foes shall fall. The sword is sharp, the spear is long, the arrow swift, the gate is strong. The heart is full that looks on gold, the dwarves no more shall suffer wrong. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells. In places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells. On silver necklaces they strung, the light of stars on crowns they hung. The dragon fire from twisted wire, the melody of harps they rung. The mountain throne once more is freed, a wandering folk the summons heed. Come haste across the ways, the king of friend and kin has need. Now call we over mountains cold, come back unto the caverns old. Here at the gates the king awaits, his hands are rich with gems and gold. The king is come unto his hall, under the mountain dark and tall. The worm of dread is slain and dead, ever so our foes shall fall. This song appeared to please Thorin, and he smiled again, and grew merry. And he began reckoning the distance to the Iron Hills and how long it would be before Dane could reach the Lonely Mountain, if he had set out as soon as the message reached him. But Bilbo's heart fell, both at the song and the talk. They sounded much too warlike. The next morning early, a company of spearmen was seen crossing the river and marching up the valley. They bore with them the green banner of the Elven King and the blue banner of the lake, and they advanced until they stood right before the wall of the gate. Again Thorin hailed them in a loud voice. Who are you that come armed for war to the gates of Thorin, son of Thrain, king under the mountain? This time he was answered. A tall man stood forward, dark of hair and grim of face. Guess who? And he cried, Hail, Thorin! Why do you fence yourself like a robber in his hold? We are not yet foes, and we rejoice that you are alive beyond our hope. We came expecting to find none living here, yet now we are met. There is a matter for a parley and a council. Who are you, and of what would ye parley? I am Bard, and by my hand was the dragon slain and your treasure delivered. Is that not a matter that concerns you? Moreover, I am by right descent to the heir of Girion of Dale, and in your hoard is mingled much of the wealth of his halls and towns, which of old Smaug stole. Is not that a matter of which we may speak? Further, in his last battle, Smaug destroyed the dwellings of the men of Esgaroth, and I am yet the servant of their master. I would speak for him and ask whether you have no thought for the sorrow and misery of his people. They aided you in your distress, and in recompense you have thus far brought ruin only, though doubtless undesigned. Now these were fair words and true, if proudly and grimly spoken, and Bilbo thought that Thorin would at once admit what justice was in them. He did not, of course, expect that anyone would remember that it was he who discovered all by himself the dragon's weak spot, and that was just as well, for no one ever did. Poor Bilbo. But also he did not reckon with the power that gold has upon which a dragon has long brooded, nor with dwarvish hearts. Long hours in the past days Thorin had spent in the treasury, and the lust of it was heavy on him. Though he had hunted chiefly for the Arkenstone, yet he had an eye for many another wonderful thing that was lying there, about which were wound old memories of the labors and the sorrows of his race. You put your worst cause last and in the chief place, Thorin answered. To the treasure of my people no man has a claim, because Smaug, who stole it from us, also robbed him of life or home. The treasure was not his, that his evil deeds should be amended with a share of it. The price of the goods and the assistance that we received from the lake men we will fairly pay in due time, but nothing will we give, not even a loaf's worth, under threat of force. While an armed host lies before our doors, we look on you as foes and thieves. It is in my mind to ask what share of their inheritance you would have paid to our kindred had you found the hoard unguarded and us slain. A just question, replied Bard. But you are not dead, and we are not robbers. Moreover, the wealthy may have pity beyond right on the needy that befriended them when they were in want, and still my other claims remain unanswered. I will not parley, as I have said, with armed men at my gate, nor at all with the people of the Elven King, who I remember with small kindness. In this debate they have no place. Begone now ere our arrows fly, and if you would speak with me again, first dismiss the elvish host to the woods where it belongs, and then return, laying down your arms before you approach the threshold. The Elven King is my friend, and he has succored the people of the lake in their need, though they had no claim but friendship on him, answered Bard. We will give you time to repent your words. Gather your wisdom ere we return. Then he departed and went back to the camp. Ere many hours were passed, the banner bearers returned, and trumpeters stood forth and blew a blast. In the name of Esgaroth in the forest, one cried, we speak unto Thorin, Thrain's son Oakenshield, calling himself king under the mountain, and we bid him consider well the claims that have been urged, or be declared our foe. At the least he shall deliver 1/12 portion of the treasure unto Bard as the dragon slayer, and as the heir of Girion. From that portion Bard will himself contribute to the aid of Esgaroth, but if Thorin would have the friendship and honor of the lands about as his sires had of old, then he will give also somewhat of his own for the comfort of the men of the lake. Then Thorin seized a bow of horn and shot an arrow at the speaker. It smote into his shield and stuck there quivering. Since such is your answer, he called in return. I declare the mountain besieged. You shall now not depart from it until you call on your side for a truce and parley. We will bear no weapons against you, but we leave you to your gold. You may eat that if you will." With that, the messengers departed swiftly, and the dwarves were left to consider their case. So grim had Thorin become that even if they had wished, the others would not have dared to find fault with him. But indeed, most of them seemed to share his mind, except perhaps fat old Bombur and Fili Akili. Bilbo, of course, disapproved of the whole turn of affairs. He had by now had more than enough of the mountain, and being besieged inside it was not at all to his taste. "This whole place still stinks of dragon," he grumbled to himself, "and it makes me sick. And cram is beginning simply to stick in my throat." That is where we will end today. So that was through to the end of chapter 15 of The Hobbit. If you missed a part of today's episode, or you want to catch up on the other editions of Lunchtime Listens that we have done, this video will be up on our YouTube channel on Thursday, and you can check out all of our other Lunchtime Listens videos also on our YouTube channel. Join us again next Monday at 1:30 Central to see what happens next. I'm Anne.
I'm Megan.
And thanks for joining us. Bye!